In the previous chapter, we saw that Tian Ran went to the police station after being interrogated. Next to the interrogation room there was another room with a one-way glass. Yuan and a police sergeant named Chen started looking at him through the glass. Chen told Yuan that Tian Ran was going to be convicted for taking justice into his own hands. She tried to persuade him, but he got angry and began abusing his position of superiority. At that moment, a police inspector named Zheng Hong appeared and scolded Chen for being incompetent. Then he went to the room where Tian Ran was and showed him a picture of a perfect mutant creature that was devouring humans and becoming more intelligent. He also showed him the 2 mutant eggs that had been taken from the bodies of cult members, and also revealed that the eggs contained a portion of human genes within their genome. Zheng Hong also revealed that on the south side of the city, there was a hidden mutant beast king who was creating his own species. Upon hearing Zheng Hong's words, he became quite confused, and while staring into his eyes, he asked him what he was talking about. With a worried look in his eyes, he asked how it was possible for someone with the power of the Beast King to remain hidden in the city without being discovered. Zheng Hong clasped his hands together and revealed that this involved another problem that was related to the account book found by the police agents in the abandoned church. Upon hearing this, he became even more confused, and while staring into his eyes, he asked if they had really found the accounting book. Zheng Hong simply nodded to indicate that yes, then explained that although the King of Beasts had some intelligence, it was still far from evolving to the normal level of human beings. This meant that it was not possible to create an organization in just a few days after the start of the mutation. He also added that unless some humans had helped him. Just before he could finish speaking, Tian Ran interrupted him and asked if he was saying that someone was on the side of the mutant beasts. He was quite confused, so he also asked why someone would do this. Zheng Hong explained that the reason was still unknown. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran stared into his eyes with a worried expression and asked why he was telling him all this. He placed a hand on the table, and while tapping it with the tip of his finger, he asked him to allow him to give him an idea of the current situation. He explained that he trusted him to make decisions more in line with the circumstances. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran stared into his eyes and asked him what he meant by that. Zheng Hong revealed to everyone that, given Tian Ran's violent attack, which had resulted in the death of several people and caused serious negative social consequences and impacts, it was specifically ordered for the military and police departments to arrest him according to national law. He also added that an execution notice had already been issued for the detained Tian Ran. Upon hearing these words, both Tian Ran and Yuan were shocked. She reached out her hand towards the inspector and asked him to wait. Just before she could finish speaking, he raised his hand indicating to her to remain silent. At that moment, Tian Ran clenched his fist and forcefully hit the table, leaving everyone surprised. He rested his arm on the table and assumed an aggressive posture, while his body emitted a sinister aura. He stared intensely at Zheng Hong with a penetrating gaze and asked him what serious consequences and negative social influences he had caused by killing the individuals from the cult who were carrying out demonic rituals. He also added that these laws and police rules seem ridiculous to him. While lowering his hand, he maintained eye contact with him and in a calm voice told him that young people should not be so angry. He also asked him to listen carefully to what he had to say first. He decided to tell everyone the truth and revealed to them all that in the current world, in the future, it was possible that military and police forces of cities might not be able to protect all civilians. He also added that nevertheless, in any case, before the collapse of the existing social system, authorities would still remain the most powerful. He rested his chin on his hands and revealed to everyone that, according to the speed of evolution of mutant beasts at this moment, the implementation of military and political integration at a federal level was an inevitable trend. And as a consequence, the military regions would be responsible for taking control of the cities. He also added that the military and police forces in the military district were different from urban military and police forces since they had zero tolerance towards behaviors that violated the law. They were as cold as war machines. He explained to Tian Ran that now they could protect him and erase his record. But once the military district took control of the city, they would no longer have that right. Tian Ran leaned both arms on the table, and while he was staring into his eyes, he asked what exactly he meant. Zheng Hong stopped leaning on the table and explained to him that it was very simple. He asked him to join them. He leaned his arms on the table again, and while his hands were intertwined, he revealed to Tian Ran that he could give him a privileged identity. In this way, even if the future military district took control of the city, he could also have access to special powers. Upon hearing this, Yuan began to stare at Tian Ran and clenched her teeth tightly as she didn't know if he would accept. He stared into Zhenghong's eyes with a penetrating gaze and asked him if he wanted him to join the police or the army. He explained to him that having an official status was not going to be something bad for him, since this way, he and his family could obtain security. Upon hearing this, Yuan sighed as she felt quite relieved. Yuan saw her sigh and became somewhat confused. Tian Ran slightly crouched down and while touching his mouth, began to stare at the ground and started thinking about what he should do with the proposal Zhenghong had made to him. He asked him to give him several minutes to think about it. Several hours later, while Yuan was holding Tian Ran's sword and some papers with both hands, she handed the sword back to Tian Ran. Then, she asked him to give her his answer by the day after tomorrow morning at the latest regarding whether he would join the police force or not. She looked into his eyes and explained that if he agreed, then he should fill out the application form. However, if he disagreed by the day after tomorrow, she would come to find him along with the law enforcement team. Tian Ran became confused and asked her how someone so beautiful could say such cold words. He also asked what had happened to the promise she had made about protecting him. Upon hearing this, she pushed the sword and papers against Tian Ran's chest and explained to him that flattery would be of no use since once he joined the police and army, all of this would no longer be a problem. He took the papers and stepped back. While staring into her eyes, he explained that he would give her an answer in 2 days. At the same time, as they were talking, a police officer who was accompanying several handcuffed prisoners passed by. Both turned to look at the prisoners, and as they were slowly moving away, Tian Ran looked at them with eyes of surprise and asked Yuan if all these prisoners were people who had participated in the transactions recorded in the ledger. She replied yes, and upon hearing this, he took a closer look at 2 of the prisoners and realized that they seemed somewhat familiar to him. Upon remembering this, an image of the 2 men came to his mind. He quickly realized that they were members of Nanchang's municipal council. When thinking about this, his eyes filled with anger. Both men felt Tian Ran's gaze and turned towards him to see what was happening. He finally realized that the sect leader had said something that had turned out to be true. At first, he had only thought that the members were some wealthy businessmen and celebrities. While he was watching them walk away, he thought that he had never expected even members of parliament to be involved in the cult. While holding the sword with one hand, he stared at them and began to wonder if these people had only been involved in the buying and selling of humans. While Yuan was looking at him, she remained speechless and started wondering what he was thinking. He began to look at them with a serious expression as he realized that those 2 men were already on the opposite side of humans. Several hours later, Tian Ran returned to the estate, went out to the orchard, and applied the growth agent to the sacred fruit of divine level 4 enhancement, which had a growth rate of 68%, had a good growth status, and only had 62 hours left to mature. He asked his little sister Han Han if she would help him if he decided to join the army or the police. In a matter of seconds, the growth agent took effect on the sacred fruit of divine level 4, causing it to slowly begin to grow, resulting in an increased growth rate of up to 78%, and reducing the remaining time for maturity to just 32 hours. Han Han opened her eyes and watched the growth of the sacred fruit for several minutes, then smiled and answered yes to the question Tian Ran had asked her earlier. While Tian Ran was crouched down next to the sacred fruit, he turned towards her and looked into her eyes. With a sincere look, he explained to her that if he joined the police force, he wouldn't be able to be with her frequently. He also asked her not to cry at night when he wasn't there. Upon hearing this, she began to look down and in a soft voice explained that she was already aware of this. Then she approached him, and while staring into his eyes, clenched both fists, and explained to him that she hoped her big brother wouldn't give up on what he wanted because of her. Upon hearing these words, Tian Ran was quite surprised as he never imagined that a little girl would have these thoughts. He reached out his hand towards her head and while he was caressing her, she looked down at the ground and reminded him that 3 years ago, he had quit his job to adopt her and return to manage the farm. She also added that she had been a burden and a big problem for her older brother. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran asked her not to be silly and also added that she hadn't dragged him into anything since it had all been voluntary on his part. While he was stroking her head, she looked at the ground and with a serious expression explained to him that Han Han didn't want to be protected all the time and wanted to grow up quickly. She clenched both fists and while looking directly into his eyes with a pleasant gaze, she explained to him that she would always support him no matter what choice he made. She also added that now she had Xiao Hai accompanying her everywhere, and also had Grandpa Nan taking care of her so she was no longer afraid. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran looked into her eyes and couldn't help but feel proud of his little sister. He then put his arm around her neck and explained to her that he was proud that his little sister had grown up. Upon hearing this, she closed her eyes and became very happy. Then he addressed her as a young adult and explained to her that from now on, she would be in charge of watering the divine tomatoes with the growth agent. Upon hearing this, she began to cry because she didn't want to water the plants. At the same time, a man wearing a black suit approached some cells, and as he walked softly, tension started to build in the atmosphere. Several minutes later, the man descended to the ground floor where all the inmates were located, and slowly his figure became visible through the door. The man started approaching the cell of an inmate who was sitting down. In one hand, he held a mutant egg that was emitting an evil aura. The inmate who was sitting and handcuffed inside the cell was bald and wearing a white tunic, also being part of the cult. Upon seeing the man in a black suit approaching his cell, the man inside the cell started laughing. This man was none other than Xiao Sheng, the leader of the cult sect. He joined his hands together and while looking at the ground with a lost gaze, he smiled and asked the man in black where it was. At that moment, the man approached his cell, crouched down, and brought the mutant egg closer under the bars. Slowly, the egg began to roll until it reached Xiao Sheng's feet, who was sitting on a chair and looking at the ground. Then, while laughing, he reached his hand towards the ground and picked up the egg, creating tension in the atmosphere. He began to stare fixedly at the egg, which was emitting an evil aura. With a smile, he slowly approached the mutant egg towards his mouth. In a matter of seconds, he put it in his mouth while still laughing with an evil laugh. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.